everybody, welcome back to Real Ripe and Real Rotten. This is a podcast where we look at the highs and lows of your favorite Hollywood celebrities. We use Rotten Tomatoes to determine the best and the worst film in someone's filmography, and then we talk about them. However, another year has passed, and we're back at the Oscars, so we're going to be doing the highest and lowest rated Oscar films from 2019. Clay, is it the 2019 Oscars or the 2020 Oscars? I always hate when... do you know? I think it's 2020. I think that's what they call them. Even though you're judging 2019, you call them the 2020 Oscars.
Right. I think they do it. I assume it's similar to the way that sports teams do
Except
it.
For baseball. That's why baseball is the superior sport, I guess.
Yeah, not anymore. Not after the Astros got taken down. And the Red Sox by proxy. That's a good question. I always assumed it was similar to that. So it's like if you win the Stanley Cup in February of May of 2020, you are the 2019 champions.
Oh, is that how they call it? I feel like it's the other way.
I think you know what it is? I think it probably is 2020 because when the schedules are referred to as like the 2019-2020 schedule. Yeah. So I don't know.
It's confusing. It's unnecessary. They should call this the 2019 Oscars. But anyway, we're going to be talking about the highest and the lowest rated.
I think that's probably why they just refer to it as the number.
Yeah, it's like the Super Bowl. Yeah, the 157th or whatever Oscars.
Right, yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about Parasite, which is the highest rated of the 2019 films. It is a 2019 South Korean black comedy thriller film directed by Bong Joon-ho, who also wrote the film's story and co-wrote the screenplay with Han Jin-won. In this movie, it follows the members of a poor household scheming to become employees of a much wealthier family by posing as unrelated, unqualified individuals. At the 92nd Academy Awards, which is the one we're talking about, the film earned 6 nominations.
I just looked it up. It is 2020.
Okay. The 6 nominations are Best Picture, or they include Best Picture, Best Director, Best International Feature Film, making it the first South Korean film to be nominated in those categories. At the 77th Golden Globes, it won for Best Foreign Language and received 4 nominations at the 73rd British Academy Film Awards. So we're going to talk about this one. It's on Rotten Tomatoes at 99%. It is the critics' consensus is an urgent, brilliantly layered look at a timely social theme. Parasite finds writer-director Bong Joon-ho in near total command of his craft. Audience scores at 93%. Critics are at 99% out of 355 reviews at this point.
Damn.
So Clay, I guess we can get right into it because we're not going to be doing, I was thinking about cutting out clips, but I think that since maybe sub 1% of our listeners speak Korean, it might not work very well to play clips. So this is going to be a clipless episode of the show. We're just going to go through it. No trailer, no clips, just us talking. So, Parasite.
Sounds like it's full of prejudice, though.
I'm living above you as we're podcasting right now. You watched this last night at the theater?
I did, yes. Yeah, I was lucky enough to see it in the theater because it's still in the theater in smaller places. I mean, I think it's probably going to be in there for a while after being nominated for Best Picture. But yeah, I saw it in the theater. Beautiful, big digital projection. Looked amazing.
Yeah, I saw it.
And I can tell you, as an artist, that the black square that you draw on the bottom of your painting is an encapsulation of your current mental state. The
black square?
Yeah, that's what she says to the kid.
Oh, on his painting.
About the kid's painting,
yeah. I watched this on Amazon because it came out on Amazon, so I watched the suboptimal version, I guess. I watched it the way Bong Joon-ho intended to watch it on my Apple Watch at 11 o'clock at night. I didn't know anything about this one. I mean, I guess to go through the Oscar nominations, the best picture this year are Ford vs. Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite, which is an interesting mix of films. This is the highest rated, although it's a pretty good year in general. They're obviously all Best Picture nominees, but they're all very highly rated on Rotten Tomatoes. Not like last year, there was more of a spread.
Yeah, it's a solid block of movies right there. And I mean, I've seen The Irishman, I've seen Joker, I've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I've seen Parasite. But my understanding of the other ones is that they are all pretty good.
Yeah. 1917 is getting a lot of late heat, I guess. It came out fairly recently, but it seems like the kind of thing that the Academy would reward. But it's a good mix of films. And Parasite is the one that we're going to be talking about here. So it's subtitled, it's in Korean. It is a film about a family usurping another wealthy family's belonging or sort of life, like moving in and taking over the space of people previously there. What'd you think of Parasite?
I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. This guy, what's his name? Bong Joon-ho. Bong Joon-ho. Dude is a monster. Like he's made some really good movies. He made a movie called The Host a few years ago, which is a monster movie that was really good. He did Snowpiercer, which I didn't love, but I appreciate. And he did a movie called Memories of Murder. I think it's called. That's really good. It's a really interesting detective story. And he's a good director. I went into this. I somehow managed to not. I don't even think I saw a trailer for this movie. Honestly,
you probably don't show it. The trailers I saw are in Korean, so it's hard to see them.
Yeah. I think I saw the poster, and the poster was suitably dark enough that I was expecting. It really caught me off guard because, based on the name and the poster, I was expecting something a lot darker, a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And
a thread on Reddit that I saw that was someone asked if it was a scary movie, and I had never even considered that. And people said it's not scary; it's just eerie.
Well, there's one part that's pretty fucking scary.
What part?
When the dude pokes his head up over the stairs and you just see his eyes.
Sure,
that's scary. That's scary.
But
as hell.
you know it's coming. I guess it's not like
right.
It's very freaky, but it's not like a terrifying, strange jump scare or anything.
But yeah, I had no idea what this was about. And I was very surprised at how funny it was. And there was a certain point in it where I was like, okay, this is really good. It's funny. The mechanisms of the con that the family are pulling off are really interesting. If this is all it is, like if it's just going along this pathway for the rest of the movie, I will be totally fine. And then they find the secret door in the basement.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, here we go. Now we're talking. And it got suitably weird after that, and has a pretty amazingly brutal, bloody climax. And I just thought it was great. And the scene with the flooding is amazing. The end shot where they pull back and it's just a fantasy of the kid writing a letter to his dad was brutal. It's great. I think it's a really, really well made movie.
Yeah, I've gone through waves of what I think about this one, and it's interesting because to me, I was actually somewhat surprised that it feels to me like a Korean Jordan Peele film.
Sure, I can see that, definitely. Yeah.
And I was surprised by that. I thought it's actually less startlingly unique than I was expecting. It's fair, not to say that it's not well made or anything, but it's more traditional than I was expecting it to really be. I thought it was going to be some sort of out there, like never seen before perspective on it. And
right,
if I have I think that it's really, really well done, and I think that he's fantastic as a director, and I think that he his control of pace is really impressive here because he manages to tell you the setup is them getting their family involved in this wealthy family's group, right? So he tells these 4 fairly repetitious stories of how each family member finds their way into the employment of this rich family. And the film never drags. He does a really good job of the last one when they do it is a montage. It breaks into a montage scene. And so you cover a lot of ground very quickly in it as opposed to watching the entire story repeat over and over again. And I think that the switch that you're talking about when they find the secret room in the basement, you can kind of tell that it's a well-directed, well-made film because when the tone shifts and the story moves in a totally different direction, it doesn't feel wrong that it's doing that.
Right.
And he has like a total control over how he wants this movie to look, how it feels, how funny it is. It's funny in a very unexpectedly American way. Like I'm surprised that the humor translates so effectively over the borders and from like a Korean perspective into an American perspective. But I guess we're more similar cultures than anything at this point, judging by cell phone use and things like that. But I liked it. I do have qualms, but we can talk about what really works with it first, I guess. And most of the technical aspects really work for me and I think are really well done.
Yeah, I think it's beautifully shot. I think his use, his visual storytelling, I think is fantastic. Where you've got the poor family, quote unquote poor family, literally living in a basement, subterranean basement, and then the house of the rich people is actually elevated above the street, which is really nice. Yep. The sequence when they're walking home in the rain is and they're just like walking deeper and deeper into the, going downstairs into, the bowels of the city.
Yeah, more and more junk is piling up as they're walking away from the rich house into the slums of wherever they're moving to. You mentioned Jim thought that it was the height of symbolism. Is that a comment on what actually happens in it, or he thought that it's the film achieving the height of its symbolism?
Well, he was saying that if they had stopped there and not kept going with it as far as like the last 20 minutes of the movie, as far as turning it into a knife fight and stuff, then he would have been like completely satisfied with the way it had gotten its message across.
Yep.
Not that he didn't like it, but it's sort of like he called it the like the bladed weapon version of a Mexican standoff, sort of. And but yeah, I thought the storytelling was great. It's kind of a few different movies in one, it feels like, because the first half up until they discover the people in the basement, it feels like kind of like a Hitchcock movie a bit, and that's intentional, I think, because I was reading a few things and they were saying that was a big influence on this stuff. But it's just a really well put together con movie.
Yep. Hitchcock movies are framed in one of the shots, actually, when he shows a picture of the old the person who lived in the house before the current family that lived there. There's a shelf next to it, and Hitchcock movies are on it.
Right. And it's just it's a well put together con. The mechanics of it are fun. It's got that the scene where they have to sneak out of the house is really great. And I kind of didn't know where it was going to go from that point, even though I think that happens after they discover the tunnel. But yeah, it must. But still, I wasn't totally sure where it was going to go. So I was definitely along for the ride on this one, and I was pleasantly surprised at where it did go.
I like the first half. They are very different movies on each side of the split of when they discover the people in the basement. The first half is surprisingly funny. It is, to me, like I think that I like the movie more if they had kept going with the first part of the movie in some ways. Mm-hmm. Like I think that fundamentally the problem that I have with this one is that in contrast to something like Jordan Peele's Get Out, right? I don't know if this movie really told me anything. Like it didn't give me a different perspective in the way that Get Out gave me a different perspective as a white guy watching a movie about racism. Like what I thought Get Out's greatest accomplishment was that it framed racism in a way that you never really thought about and made it symbolic in a way that was obviously them commenting on racism, but it felt different at that time. Like you never... meeting up with the very liberal like guy who tells you about supporting Obama endlessly, and like seeing things like that through a certain perspective where it's not outright racism, but it's this weird universe that black people exist in relationship to white people. This one, I don't feel it did that. Like I don't feel it really changed my perception on anything. And what I liked about the initial part of the movie was that early on, the middle class family, we'll call them, the not the Parks, the Kims. The Kims are very unlikable in the first half of this movie, which is really interesting. And they are people who are largely leeching off and parasitic of the Parks, who are the wealthy family. And the wealthy family is portrayed as kind of gullible and ignorant and not really all that bright in what they're doing. And they're being taken advantage of by this other family who has kind of wormed their way into their lives. And I thought that was a really interesting comment on something. The movie turns, and while I don't think it has like this overarching point of what it's saying about class struggle, besides the fact that everybody is fighting, I feel like when they turn it and they make it more that the wealthy family are villainous as well, it feels more traditional at that point, even though I think what he's doing is just saying that the class warfare is constantly going on from all angles at that point. And even the introduction of the basement family doesn't really save it. It adds an interesting wrinkle, which is that one of the interesting things about class struggle is that the lower class tiers are constantly fighting with each other to get into the upper class tier with
Right.
the wealthy families. And I
Right.
like that, but I was really just surprised that he portrayed the Kims as so unlikable in the early half.
Well, I don't know if I would say that the upper class family is portrayed as villainous, really, in any way.
I think they eventually
think-
get there because they have all those really sledgehammery stuff. Like I was commenting before, we had a broken connection earlier, but I was commenting about Jim's thing about the symbolism. I feel the movie is not very subtle in a lot of ways. Like they talk about the stench of poor people repeatedly.
Right.
And that's when they start really harping on that. And I feel that the wealthy family is portrayed more as a cruel and not really understanding what is going on beneath them type of villain at that point. They're not outright villains, but they're not great people.
See, I don't think that they're cruel, though. I think that they're just oblivious, and which is which causes the Kims to react a lot negatively, and it comes off in a sort of negative manner. But I don't think that they're portrayed necessarily as bad people at all. I think it's just a matter of there's the scene towards the end when they're throwing the impromptu birthday party for the kid, and they're intercutting it with the Kim family having to pull their life back together after the flood. And the mother is talking about how great it is that it rained so much and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They're not doing that to be evil, and I don't think that they're being portrayed as evil. I think it's just an obliviousness based on the separation of the classes.
Yeah.
is what is breeding the contempt coming from the Kim family.
I guess I'd argue they're so oblivious as to be cruel. Like the stench thing, they're constantly mentioning it. Like, what is that stink around here? You know what I mean? What in the presence of the Kims?
Yeah, they're only doing it in the presence of the Kims because they don't know the Kims are there. Because the only time that they talk about
she's in the car getting driven around by him, and she opens the window.
She acknowledges that there's a smell. She doesn't say anything. She just opens the window.
Okay.
And the only reason that Kim reacts to it is because he was there for that conversation when it was had.
Yes. And which is because they're oblivious, that they don't realize what the stench is coming from them. I mean, I think that their callousness is as much of they're equally villainous compared to the Kims, I think, in a different way. Like the ignorance is the creation of the villain is the wrong word, but their ignorance is the reason that there's any kind of conflict whatsoever.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's, I think their obliviousness is, it's negative it's as negative as anything in that it is clearly, what's the word? Like it's blissful ignorance.
Yes.
They're not making any they're not making any attempt to cross boundaries or anything, or really even connect to these people in any way.
They stay on their side of the line, as the father says frequently.
Right, and the only reason that they do talk to them is because they don't think that they're poor people. Like, they'd never let them into the house to teach their kids and shit if they knew that they were poor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do they... Yeah, I guess because they're posing as semi-educated intellectuals. At least the kids are. The housekeeper and the father are portrayed as probably a little bit more lower class or something like that.
But even still, they're from high-class services.
Yes.
Supposedly.
Yeah. Which is probably a Korean reference that we're not familiar with, I guess.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like that would translate fairly well. If you were looking for a driver or a house cleaner, and if you were people on the up and up, and you had a card for a high class cleaning service, then yeah, I think that translates more or less.
Sure, but the people working for that high class service aren't upper class. Your maid is not making money. You know what I mean? Like the maid is still someone who's fairly low paid at that point. So
I see. Yeah.
I think that the basement family functions interestingly because they are the lowest of the low, because they're literally on the bottom. They're in the basement at the point of this movie. And I think one of the things that it did really well was just to show the struggle between those two and how much the lower families are willing to fight with each other to get into the good graces of the wealthier family. And
yeah, and they do that in the complete ignorance of the wealthy people.
Right. That because yes, the wealthy people are kind of above everything, and the father has a line about everyone needs to stay in their lanes. I think the funniest joke in it is when the daughter leaves her panties behind, and so the father thinks that the driver is having sex with someone in his car, and but he's only concerned about it being in his seat. He didn't want it to happen in his seat. It could be, why didn't he just do this in the front seat? And that's very funny, but that speaks to how those characters define themselves and like what they view as important and everything like that. I would agree with you that no one is really a villain. They're all various shades of good and bad mixed together, combining and clashing to make this overall conflict. But I think that early on, the Kims are much more portrayed as the weasels of this, just because of what they're doing to get into it.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think so.
And outside of that, it flips at the halfway point. It goes the other way, I think, and it makes everything a little bit more convoluted, and you start to gain sympathy for the Kims in a way that wasn't there earlier, as the turn in the story, at least in like terms of what the conflict is at that point.
Yeah, I think ultimately, they are portrayed as sort of weaselly, but at the end, at the bottom of it all, it's just they're just trying to support their family.
Yes,
and then ultimately they do it through nefarious means. So when they kind of switch it on you and kind of make you feel bad for them, and it ultimately ends in a more depressing, pathetic angle for the Kims, I still think it kind of works. I think the birthday party shenanigans work decently well in that it requires the Kims to come out, face consequences, but also come out of the sort of fantasy they've been living in.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it would be tough to go the whole way without making you feel a little empathetic at all towards the Kims. I mean, that would kind of be mean.
It is tough, but I think that's a more like I think this is a very, 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 very good movie, right? What I think was going on when you have 355 positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes is that I think the reason this movie is so well received, above and beyond, by going to a 99% movie with that many ratings and stuff like that, is that I wonder how much of the politics of this appeal to the journalism of movies. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, and what was really surprising to me was I thought for the first half of the movie, I was like, oh, they're playing the middle or lower class family as more villainous. That hardly ever happens in movies. Like that's a strange parasitic symbolism or metaphor, as the kid is wants to say the whole time in the movie. I was really surprised by that. So when it reverted to more of a traditional class warfare is like on all sides, I was a little bit less impressed with it, just because I was not expecting it to go so traditional at that point and to take such an accepted viewpoint of what the class struggle is between each other.
Yeah, you were just hoping it would show how dirty and awful poor people are.
Exactly. Well, that would have been an interesting decision to do. Like, you never see movies like that. It's the same with do you know Whiplash?
Yes.
The drum movie. Whiplash is really only interesting to me as a movie because it endorses the view that's very unsympathetic at this point, that a certain amount of abuse can create greatness. And that's like a really novel idea in a movie. And I think you could argue that it does happen in some cases. And I was expecting this to go the same way, but it didn't. But I do at the same time like the way that they approach the story later on. It's not that it's bad. It's just not what I was really expecting, or I was surprised by its turn into more of a sort of populist idea about class struggle at that point.
Well, I did like that the parasitic relationship ultimately goes both ways.
It does, yep.
And because as they show, the high class family is essentially useless without the help of these people who are just fighting for table scraps, essentially.
Yes, the wealthy family is fairly broken at this point, and they kind of rely on the middle. They talk a lot to their employees. They find a comfort in them that they don't seem to find from each other, and it plays up the whole. The youngest son is in all kinds of like trauma counseling courses and stuff. It's very much taking the piss out of like what the wealthy people will do when they have an option to not be scurrying around looking for free Wi-Fi signals. It makes fun of them in that range, but they are parasitic because they need the Kims to be whole in a lot of ways. Like the Kims show them something that they don't seem to be able to find on their own.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I found really interesting was that when it comes to showing the family or showing the families, you very rarely see all of the is it the parks? The parks are the rich people, right?
Parks of the rich, yep.
Yeah. You very rarely see all of the parks in a scene together at the same time.
You barely get any good shots of the kid. The kid's face, he's always
Right.
running around in the background, yeah.
Yeah. It's very, the house is very big. They don't spend a lot of time together in there, except for when they're going camping. But even there, I don't even think you see.
Don't see the
Maybe
father in that shot.
Yeah, maybe you get a shot of all four of them in the car, but I don't think you do.
No, I don't think you do. You see the mother and the kid in the back seats, I think, and there's two others that you're not seeing.
Yeah, whereas you have a lot of time spent with all four of the members of the Kim family. And
They
so
eat a lot of dinners together, yeah. They
Yeah,
eat food together,
yeah.
yep.
And they get smashed on other people's liquor together as well. But it's another great instance of visual storytelling where they're showing how this family is fairly separate, and they seem to be throwing a lot of money at the problems that their family has without really addressing what it is to be a family. Like they even though the husband and wife have sex later in the movie, they imply that the husband doesn't even really like the wife.
Yes, yeah. He laughs every time Mr. Kim says, "Do you love her?" Of course, so therefore everything's going to work out. He says yes, very sarcastically.
Yeah, the Kim family is more of a family, whereas the Park family is more of an asset, I guess, or maybe asset's not the right word, but like it's another thing for the wealthy people to have, is like you need to have a family.
Yeah, the money's actually interfering with the family life of the Parks because the father is always away on business. The mother has her son in therapy and things like that, so he's taken away from her because of tutoring and things like that. So their ability to pay for services are actually separating them as a family in a way that the poor family is not, because they have to work together to fold pizza boxes or just eat dinner and things like that, or live in a very tiny apartment.
Yeah. And I thought it was an interesting way to present the two families, and they don't ever like talk about it. Like, I think in a lesser movie, there's a scene where somebody mentions that, and but they didn't. They kept that element of it fairly subtle, and I think it works pretty well.
But do you not? I would say that the movie is overly overt in what it's talking about. Did you not have a problem with that? Like, I find it not a very subtle movie, and I was surprised by how unsubtle it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's not particularly subtle overall, but I don't necessarily think it has to be.
Yeah.
That's what the story's about, and they're kind of doing stuff inside of that idea.
I guess I'm surprised that for something.
Do you think Get Out is subtle about racism?
Well, but I think that the metaphor is more interesting than what the metaphor is here. Really,
Sure.
Like the Get Out metaphor is kind of there's no metaphor in Get Out that's as heavy-handed as the mother talking about how good the rain has been for her while it's flooding the apartments of the other people at the same time. That feels really heavy-handed. The fact that just the metaphor of they live in different levels of housing feels a little bit on the nose in some ways to me. Like, I guess I was just surprised that a film that's getting such acclaim for being so well directed and everything like that, it felt like if you were not as technically good at what he is and making movies like this, people would say this is kind of hacky. Like, why is this so obvious? You know what I mean? I was surprised by it.
Yeah, I actually think it's closer to Us than it is
which I haven't
Get Out.
seen. Yeah.
Yeah, Us is Yeah, I would say Us is a lot more similar to this than Get Out is.
But you think Get Out is better than Us, or you do think Us is better than Get Out?
I think Get Out is much better than Us.
Okay.
I think Us is got it going on for like the first 2/3, and then it kind of takes a nosedive. But
which is not what I think happens in this movie. But I
No.
understand what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, I shouldn't say no. It doesn't take a nosedive. It just it over explains itself.
Yeah.
And it does. I think it ultimately does disservice to its own mystery and metaphor by over explaining exactly what's going on, because it just makes, opens up more questions and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think this does that. I think they keep they keep it reined in as far as like the basement underneath the house and stuff like that, to a point where it's believable that nobody would find it. And so I think it's I kind of lost where I was going with that, but it's similar to Us than it is Get Out, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were just saying that you didn't. I think that the movie is. I don't know about Us, but you can tell me if it's wrong. This movie is not really a mystery, so there's no sense that the reveal kind of undoes things, really.
No.
And so, because of that, you don't feel let down if you don't really enjoy the ending or whatever, because I think that it's a change in the movie halfway that kind of shifts the stakes and everything, but it doesn't really. You're never.
I don't even know if I would call it a change so much, because all it's really. I mean, yes, obviously it's like they literally unearth another level of the story, but
yes, another socioeconomic class that is there. Yeah.
Well, I don't find them that much different, though. I think what it's revealing more than anything else is that the Kims are going about their business thinking that they're the smartest people in the world, until they realize that there are other people doing the exact same thing, and then that becomes a fight.
Yes, but the Kims are winning to me, so therefore the Kims are the middle class of this society, and the poverty people are the ones who can't get the job, and they're the ones who live in the basement.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. They don't ultimately. The Kims don't ultimately learn anything because of that. I don't think. Where it's like I think probably what they're doing by revealing that subterranean level is revealing is essentially doing to the Kims what not doing to, but like where the Parks don't really recognize that the Kims' socioeconomic standing really exists or needs to be dealt with. Yeah. The Kims also don't understand or know about what the other family's level is.
Yeah, I think it's varying. The middle class is the upper class is aware of the middle class in this one, is how I would describe it, because they interact with them. They're unaware of the lower class because they literally don't know that they exist, but at the same time, the lower class are the ones who are turning the lights on for them and things like that. So they're relying on this ghost class that they don't acknowledge, who is down there literally banging their head against the wall trying to do something.
Right.
And like... So it's kind of an interesting movie, because while I think it's super sledgehammery in some of its symbolism and metaphors, it's actually deeper than that in a lot of levels too. Like there is a little bit of thought that you have to put into kind of unpack what it is going on, because they never really say this in the movie, but the subtlety is kind of covered up by very overt unsubtle things, which is really interesting. And if it's intentional, it's a very deft hand he had in making the movie. And again, I really like the movie. It's just a mishmash of stuff that I was not really expecting from this, and that's what it turned into.
One of the more interesting elements of it that or details that I thought was kind of surprisingly, I don't know if scathing is the word, but is how the guy in the sub basement has this sort of like godlike reverence for Park. The father, the basic, this super poor guy thinks that the super rich guy is like the king of the world, essentially.
Lights the path for him when he comes home.
Yeah,
flicks on the lights.
Yeah. I thought that relationship was really interesting, as far as what that represents, as far as how poor people might view rich people in a godlike manner.
Yeah, and they tie it in by the kid's trauma is apparently he thinks he sees a ghost at some point, and it's just him dealing with the mental break. I forget what the term is. The sort of mental holding two conflicting opinions at once, where he's never really acknowledged that there's this lower class, but he sees them for the first time and doesn't know what they are. And that's kind of neat. I guess one of the kids' paintings, I didn't notice this, but I was reading it. One of the kids' paintings has a bloody pattern on the character that he painted, like the guy does at the end from banging his face on the wall.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So there's all this stuff going on, and I think it's really good. And the movie held my attention, and I think it has a lot to. I don't know if it has a lot to say about the class structure, but I think it says it in a fairly interesting way that is metaphorically neat, if not insightful at the same time. So
sure.
I was just surprised at the lack of insight into it, but I do think the metaphor is kind of cool and fun, and they change it up enough to keep you on your feet as to what you're expecting from the movie.
Yeah, and there's an element of the temporarily embarrassed millionaire symptom or syndrome going through, which I enjoyed, which is that the Kim family, they're always kind of like, well, when we get our money, or when this house is ours, or when you marry the daughter, or even at the end when the son is like, I've got a plan, I'm gonna get a bunch of money, and it's this level of not totally being while being conscious of your standing, you feel like it's a temporary setback instead of like the hand you earn. The way that it is.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. At the end, I was getting a little bit upset when they showed the bit where the kid is buying the house and then the father comes up out of the basement, because I was like, oh man.
It's a weird ending if that's the ending.
Yeah. Is that really what they're going to, sort of undercutting a lot of stuff here? And then, of course, they cut to, it's just him writing a letter that's never going to happen.
Yeah, it's a good dream sequence because the character is dreaming at that point, or the commentary that the film is making this is all just a dream that the kid is going to have. It's not, he will possibly never be able to break out and buy or have enough money that he can literally free his father from the prison of the basement in this. And it's sad. It's a sad ending on a movie that you don't feel is really like the tone of the initial half hour or hour or whatever really kind of feels like you're going to end up in some kind of ending where everybody wins, sort of like it's got that kind of like maybe not happy go lucky, but it's got kind of like a jovialness to what's going on, and the families are very funny and things like that, but it turns much darker.
I actually thought it was going to be even more on the nose and have whatever fallout between the two lower class families happen, and like all of them end up dead or something, and the upper class family is just oblivious that anything even happened.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they didn't do that. I'm really interested to know what Min is going to think when he gets back from studying abroad. Because he left a pretty tidy house, and that a lot of stuff happened while he was gone for 2 months or whatever.
Yeah, it's he didn't leave him in good hands, I guess. Is the daughter the only one that dies, right?
From the family, yes.
Yes.
The daughter dies. The underground people die.
Oh, that's right.
It's unclear whether or not the son survived, the younger son, because he had the seizure.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And they said there's only you need to get him to a hospital in 15 minutes or something. They never follow up on that.
No, you don't see the parks after that scene.
Right.
They just move out. So you assume some of them are left because they sell the house, but you don't know what exactly happened to the rest of them. Yeah, I mean, technically, I think it's really kind of excellent. He has a great understanding of pace and tone and everything like that. And I think the movie looks really nice and really has a lot of different features to it. Like he has a lot of different styles that he shoots and everything. And I think that he's really good at framing. He's really good at sort of moving the camera. We just got done watching like Into Darkness and Star Trek 2009, And it's nice to. What's nice about this Real Ripe show is that we're not just watching the Star Trek movies. You can actually see what it means to make like a good movie out of things, which is something that we're not really exposed to.
I remember when we started that, it was like such a breath of fresh air where I was like, oh my God, I forgot how good movies were. It's not just not just the level of syndicated television.
Yes. Yeah. No, there is a lot going on. I mean, do you I know that you haven't seen all the movies. Did this feel while you were watching it like it's a Best Picture winner nominee?
Yeah, I think it could be. I think.
Did it ever give you that wow moment while watching? I never felt a wow moment. I had like a solid appreciation for it. I feel very much like when I watched Roma for last year.
Did that? What won last year?
Not Roma. Green Book. Green Book won.
Green Book?
Yeah.
I don't know if I think I haven't seen Green Book, but I'm going to say this is probably a better movie than Green Book.
This is a better movie than Green Book. Yes, it is. Green Book's not a bad movie, but Green Book is not an Academy Award winner. I wouldn't say, but it's a B+ of a movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I think in a different year, well, I think it's a toss-up because I'd say they could go this way because it's such an outside choice. But when you have it's the same year as Martin Scorsese's probably final gangster epic, and 1917, which is basically I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to assume it's Saving Private Ryan mixed with The Revenant, as far as the way it's structured and
visually
shot
looks.
and everything.
Yeah.
And you've got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is a Quentin Tarantino movie about Hollywood.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing the Academy loves, it's movies about Hollywood.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny because
Joker, which I don't know, I can't see Joker winning, but.
Yeah, it leads nominations.
Who knows?
It's going to be one of those things. It leads nominations and wins one minor category, kind of. Although I guess Joaquin Phoenix is the favorite for winning actor or something. But we'll see. We'll be talking about that. Picking the best winner thing is always weird. I just don't know if this. This is kind of the praise from the movie. I was tired when I started watching it, and I woke up while I was watching it, which hardly ever happens, particularly with bad movies. You kind of give up after a while and fall asleep.
Sure.
But this engaged me, kept me awake, but I never was watching it going like, oh, this is it. Like, what a movie we've got going here. So I don't know, but at the same time, I think it depends how much the Academy rewards craft. Would you agree that this movie is stronger in craft than maybe whatever the other thing that the Academy looks for? Like, I don't want to call it heart, but something like heart. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Probably. Yeah. I think so if I was going to pick two things that were against it as far as the Academy goes, it's that it's not very flashy visually. It's great. It looks amazing. It's very well directed. The cinematography is excellent, but it's not like it's not splashy.
It's subtle brilliance in a way that the narrative is not. The filmmaking is subtly brilliant.
Right. It's the filmmaking is subtly brilliant versus Tarantino is kind of undeniable at this point. 1917 obviously has its thing. Joker is very clearly going for a certain aesthetic and like really drilling into that. The Irishman is Martin Scorsese doing whatever he does and some really ill thought out CGI.
Can CGI ruin an otherwise a very capable movie as Martin Scorsese's challenge?
Have you seen the video where someone
I haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Well, yeah, go ahead and explain. It was on the Star Trek show, so you might as well explain here what it is.
Oh, yeah. It's I forgot I brought it up previously. It's someone took clips from The Irishman and used free open source deepfake technology to actually put younger faces of all the actors onto the characters in Irishman, and it looks 100% better.
Yeah, basically updating the CGI for their de-aging makeup.
Yeah, it's really one of those things where it's like they spent a lot of money to do something that you probably could have done for $20 if you found the right person on YouTube.
It just needed the latest Windows update to come through and fix everything for them. Damn this Adobe After Effects.
But the other thing, Parasite isn't super splashy, and also, the acting in it is good, but I don't think the acting in it is so good that it's going to stand out among some of those other things. Like Marriage Story is like capital A acting from what I know of it. I haven't seen it yet.
Seeing some blowback on that, though, actually. I'm seeing a little bit of overacting blowback.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's full of it. But,
it has Academy. It has acting that the Academy says this is acting sometimes.
Yes, exactly. And so it's like the acting is fairly subtle in this movie. And I don't know if that's a plus or a minus, but
it's tough because it's foreign, It's
sure, yeah.
Because
it's always interesting. Years ago, Jim mentioned this, and he's not wrong. Where it's I'm not saying that the acting in this is bad or anything, because it's not. It is good, but there is a level of heightening of the perceived quality of it if you're reading the subtitles. Because you don't have that same sort of recognition of how a line is delivered,
yes,
that you do in English. It's almost like the British accent effect, where it's like, oh well, of course it's good. He's British.
He sounds intelligent.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a similar kind of thing where you can watch a movie where the acting might not be as good as you think it is because you're not totally catching all of all of what's happening because it's a language you're not familiar with. So if you're reading it and the text sounds great, but it might not be up to that might be a higher level than what is actually being said.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. There's no way to avoid it. I'm not saying that you should be anti-foreign dubbed, or not dubbed, but foreign subtitled in English films.
Great. Yeah.
The thing I was surprised is...
I wish more American movies had something like that would make them better instantly.
The thing that's funny about this one is there's actually there was a surprising amount of dialogue. The subtitles in some scenes move very quickly, and that's sometimes detrimental, especially to films like this, because as an American who can't hear and understand the language, I'm spending 80% of the time looking at the subtitle, like the bottom of the frame, and I just don't have time to appreciate the entire thing. And it's probably a movie that would reward rewatches because there is so much dialogue, you aren't allowed to really absorb the entire thing. And I think on rewatch, you could probably ignore a lot of the subtitles at some point and just watch the movie as it's supposed to be. I thought the acting was good, and I thought maybe the acting was in some cases better than the lines that they were given. So the fact that they sounded believable at all, even though it's in another language, helped me understand it, I suppose. I think that everyone's fairly... I don't think there's a weak link in the cast. I didn't notice anyone that was wrong to be in there.
No, I thought everybody in the family was great. I thought the daughter, Jessica, or whatever her non-anglicized name was, I don't remember.
Yes,
I thought she was great.
She has one scene when she's been drinking and is laying on the couch. I couldn't tell if she was doing a good drunk impersonation.
Yeah, I was having trouble there too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's like a cultural... She sounded very anime-esque to me, and I don't know if that's offensive or if that's like how stereotypical drunken women are supposed to be portrayed in Asian culture or something. Who knows? But that was the one line that stuck out to me as not quite hitting the mark.
And the dad is great. He's been in a bunch of this guy's movies.
Yeah.
He's consistently good in all of them. And I think you're right though. I think there's a certain point, more or less, after you kind of get the setup, where you don't even the visual storytelling and the action is portrayed so well. I don't even think you need to read the subtitles to get exactly what's going on.
Yeah. Once you know the specifics, you can probably ignore the words at that point. The words don't become important.
So I bet it is. I bet it does actually hold up better on rewatch because you probably don't need to focus on that stuff as much.
Yeah. Yeah. I did I did like it. This is one of those movies. I don't know if, like, in a week from now, if you ask me whether or not this has gone up or down in my estimation, I'm not really sure. When I watched it last night, I thought that was pretty good. Then I thought about it this morning. I was like, I don't know if that's as good as I thought it was. And then I thought about it this afternoon before we started recording. I was like, no, it's better than I thought it was. So I'm kind of swinging all over the place. And it's probably just the mark of a good movie, I guess, if you actually have to think about things that much.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I mean, the worst thing that can happen to a movie or any piece of art really is you just forget it as soon as you finish it.
Yeah. Or you hang it on the wall and ask other people to interpret. I think that's a good thing to focus on before we head out of here is just the I think one of the things that they do, the metaphor of the story, at least in how it works for me, is the disconnect between the classes, which I think they portray very, very well. Yeah. I think particularly the wealthy family is played as you're saying, they're not really villains, but they are out of the loop enough where it's not their fault that they're doing sort of villainous actions, which I think is important, and I think is a interesting metaphor, a way to approach the wealthy class and how they deal with the underclasses and things like that. The one thing that I think is maybe not even lacking, I guess you could say this, is that you don't get the sense that there are a great number of the underclass. Interestingly, like they kind of do that through the two families that are battling with each other, but you don't get the sense that this upper crust is a very limited in number thing in terms of the numbers of the lower class or anything like that, which you probably don't really need. But I guess go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I guess as far as number of people on screen, you're probably right, because there's really not that many people on screen. But I mean, they do, that whole walk back home afterwards, they
yeah, you walk by a lot more.
Make it, yeah. There's a lot of stuff that they walk by. That's clear that there's a lot of people. But
yes.
But yeah, as far as actual number of people on screen, you're right.
And people literally pissing on each other.
Yes.
Yeah. Down in the basement, and yeah, and the class battle. As much as I was really interested in the fact that the early part sort of portrays the Kims as the more Weasley of the group, I do like the fact that they go to battle with the lower class people, the people of the basement, in the way through the movie. And I think that was a really interesting decision. Instead of having them, team up or something, and then the movie ends with them assuming the mantle of the Parks, it's a much more sad, realistic, tragic type ending that goes to it.
I think the one thing that I found kind of interesting is that, because the Kims are portrayed as sort of opportunistic, but I was surprised that they're portrayed as opportunistic, but they don't start out really that way. They're just trying to do what they have to do. But they're not coming off as like bad people.
No, they come across as overly educated, which is probably intentional. They come across as and that comes through in their scheme. Their scheme is very effective, and they're very good. It's either they're very good at pretending to be educated, or the rich people are so out of the loop that they have no idea what educated means to them. Right.
Right. So yeah, they're not portrayed as like bad people. They're smart. They're trying to keep their family together. And so once they start the scheme and they really get into it, I was actually really surprised that at no point do any of the family members object to what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Like there was no one, like they don't even like for a second go like, maybe we shouldn't do this. Or once they get into it, there was no dissenting member who was like, this is one thing. We've all gotten jobs through nefarious means, sure, but we're getting good paying jobs now. Maybe let's dial it back, or do we really need to do X?
It's a little bit like, I guess the metaphor there would be like going to a job interview and feeling bad for the people who didn't get the job when you do.
Sure.
Which is they're a little bit more cruel in this because they actively set out to fire people from their positions so that they can assume it. But it is just the cutthroat nature of needing the jobs. They have that fairly on the nose line of like, there's 500 people applying for a janitor position. Like, you got to be lucky with what you get. And so that's the mentality I think that they're playing into.
Yeah, which is fine. But at the same time, I'm surprised that no one really changes, even towards the end, except for the son, who doesn't really change his mind as much as he's going to kill those two people with a giant rock.
The Rock of Wealth. What is that rock called? It's called a
it's
Scholar's Rock.
something.
Scholar's Rock.
The Scholar's Rock. But there's no moment until essentially the father has to choose between keeping pressure on his daughter's mortal wound and throwing the Park family the keys to the car.
Yeah.
That he really kind of takes stock of what he's done.
I didn't even get that point. I guess that's what the decision is there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wondered why he threw the key. Okay. I understand. I mean, maybe that's me being an idiot there, but I was wondering why he threw the keys and why they focused on it. It's because only one can be saved.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And then he immediately feels bad about it and kills the guy.
Makes the right decision.
Yeah. But yeah, like I was a little surprised that no one in the family kind of objected at any point to what they were doing or showed any sort of like deep into it remorse or anything. Which is probably, I don't know if I would change that, but it's the one thing that I found I was surprised was not in it.
Were you surprised that I was a little bit surprised that there is no moment where their con almost unravels, besides the fact that when they're hiding in the house and they're trying to escape. But there's no scenes where the wealthy family starts to be like ask questions that they're not sure of what's going on. They play it very much as a farce in that case, where the family's just in.
The closest they come is when the former maid almost sends them the video of all of them in the basement.
They treat a send button like a loaded gun in that scene, which
I thought that was
funny.
great. Yeah,
that's the other thing is just the relative. It's just an interesting commentary on like where wealth sits right now, like where the poorest of the poor in this movie, everyone has a cell phone. Right. It's like when you think of poor people, you don't necessarily think of that, but the relative to some of the really actually poor countries in the world, countries like South Korea and America, the poor are relatively well off. It's just it's this, this thing of we all have this tech now. It's like the tech has just become so important to your life that you can't exist without it, even if you don't have the money to afford it.
Yeah, I mean they're living in their basement apartment fighting for a Wi-Fi signal so they can get an update about the shitty job that they have.
Yep. And folding pizza boxes.
Yeah. I was also surprised. Well, I don't know if I was surprised, but it was a weird detail to include. The thing about the former maid's face being all busted up, and she's she's got a split lip and looks like she got beat up or something. And the husband asked her what happened, and she's like, "Don't worry about it."
Yeah,
I don't really know why they even did that or what the point of having her busted up like that was.
No, I'm not sure. What's the? Am I misremembering when that happens? Why is she busted up? Do you know?
No, they never say. She shows up at the house in the rain, and then when she comes in, she goes down to the basement, and then they go down into the sub basement where she sees her husband. And then when she's talking to her husband's like, "What happened to your face?" And he's like, don't worry about it.
But is she busted up when she comes, or is she busted up when she falls trying to push the shelf out of the way?
Oh, maybe it's that. I might have missed that. Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
I think that's what I think she hits her face when she tries to push the thing.
I think I thought because of the rain and that the camera was not super flattering at the doorbell.
Oh, she had like black eyes or something. It looked like.
Yeah, I thought she looked like she had gotten roughed up or something. I could be. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is because when she fell down pushing the thing open. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Which is a darkly comic beat. I laughed when that happened. I don't think you're supposed to, but it's they played it very funny. It's physically very funny looking. I think we're done with this one. This is Parasite, 99%. It's the best rated of the 2020 Oscar films. And we're going to be back with Joker, which is the lowest rated, which is at 69 or 70%, I think. All right. And you've seen that one, haven't you?
I have, yes.
I have not seen Joker yet, so it'll be the first time watching that one. Although I was reading a review that these movies share some similarities between the two of them, including a patient who cannot stop laughing for medical reasons.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if it takes up about 30 seconds in Parasite, but is like the crux of the character in Joker. So
just
compare at your own peril, I suppose. But no, I guess you could say
it's about class struggle, though, right?
Yeah,
both of them.
It is. Yeah, Joker is very much about class struggle. So I think you could say that there is they're similar, but the the Kim family are a lot more industrious than Arthur Fleck is in Joker, I think.
Yeah. I think I would agree with that without seeing it, but that makes sense to me. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Thanks to our patrons. You can support the show at patreon.com/thepensky-file if you're so inclined. Much appreciated. A couple dollars a month and you get extra stuff. And our captain tier shout out happens now. Andrew Chirlog, Ben Douglas, Captain Core, Cardinal Doomsday, Christian Michaels, Christian Pouch, Darth Moss, David Beardmore, David Cage, Wayne Hackett, Eric Johnson, HH28, Yarpy, Jeffrey Koch, Joint Mango, Jordan Cooper, Kevin Reyes, Cal Barrett, Matt Courier 6, Matt Cutler, Matt Ross, Mike Burnett, Nathan Elliott, Neil Brennan, Nick Sergi, Robert Cummins, Russell Elliott, Samuel Custer, Grim Santos, Sean Spinobi, Tark Latif, Tom Hiles, Vault 13 Hero, and Will Yates. Thank you very much. Let us know what you guys thought about Parasite. It's a good movie. It's very interesting. I would recommend everyone watch it, which is not something I said for Bohemian Rhapsody. This isn't the worst of the year, but I'll base everything against Bohemian Rhapsody, I think, going forward.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's you'd recommend this one, right? This is worth watching.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think so.
I wouldn't be upset if this won.
I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe I don't think it deserves to win, but I would not be upset if this won, I guess. Yeah.
No, I mean, honestly, I would say it has a great chance, if only because everything else in the category is kind of like a cliche Best Picture movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got the middle-aged white guy car movie. You've got the mobster epic
remake of an old classic, Little Women.
Yeah, you've got the high drama, melodrama, Marriage Story. You've got the war movie. Yep. You've got the Hollywood movie. You've got whatever Joker is, and
the Black
Jojo
Panther
Rabbit
of last year. Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. No,
do you think Joker is better than Black Panther?
Oh boy, you know how to answer that question without getting.
If I said you had to watch one movie right now, which one would you pick?
Ooh, if I had to rewatch one, honestly, probably Joker.
Yeah.
I think Joker, okay. All things being equal, you know, let's take internet controversy out of it for a second.
Sure. Just on pure movie watching level right here.
Yeah, I think that they're very different movies. Like just because they're both comic book properties does not put them really on the same level.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like Joker is probably a bit better of a movie.
I have to assume Joker is more interesting than Black Panther is. Like, Black Panther is a good movie, but I don't think any of the MCU movies are... I wouldn't say any of the MCU movies are interesting, which is different from entertaining, but that would be my sense without having ever seen Joker.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I think there's a lot more fascinating filmmaking and character work being done in Joker than Black Panther, probably, yes.
Well, we'll see when we get to it. That one will be out soon because we got to finish this before the Oscars happen. But thank you very much, guys, for listening. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
No, I don't think so. We've got a Rotten Horror Picture Show should be starting up pretty soon, if not already when this comes out. I'm not sure when this comes out.
Yeah, the first one should be out by the time this one comes out.
And that's the Horror Movie Podcast with me and Amanda, where we cover the movies off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. We're starting with number 101, The Shining.
Yeah. So you guys can check that out. Go to thepenskyfile.com and then click on the Rotten Horror Picture Show. Do we have a B-roll for No, we were
Oscars?
thinking about it. I don't know which one I would like to watch. I was going to wait until we see what these two movies end up feeling like and then go for what hits us in the right mood, I guess, for the third one.
Sure.
Do you have any candidates?
I don't really think I want to watch The Irishman again.
No, I don't want to watch that again.
But I would do I keep staring at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, so that feels like it might be the one for me.
I think that it's either that I think we talked about it. It's either Once Upon a Time or Marriage Story would be the two that I would suggest watching.
Same, yes. That's because I said I don't know if I'd watch Marriage Story otherwise.
Yeah.
So maybe that one.
Yeah. Everyone says Ford and Ferrari is the good, competent movie that doesn't really deserve to be there. Kind of. It's like it's that. I'm not really into, Irishman is 5 hours long. Don't need that. Jojo Rabbit doesn't really tickle my interest in any way. Mm-hmm. Little Women, not particularly interested. So yeah, it's either of those two, I think. 1917, I'm just not in the mood for a war story, I don't think, but we'll see. Mm-hmm. All right, guys, thank you very much for listening. We'll see how Parasite does at the 92nd Academy Awards, and we'll be back with Joker in a couple of weeks. All right, thanks very much. See you.